Well, I guess it all started when I was a medical student. My hometown is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but I study both in Indonesia and in Malaysia. So my medical degree was a twinning program where I did my first 3 years in Bandung, Indonesia, and the following 3 years in Malaysia. So during my first year of medical school, it was actually the first time that I lived among the poor people because I've always lived in Kuala Lumpur. It's a big city, and for the first time living among the poor community in Bandung, Indonesia, makes me realize, especially in class, like when we like see patients, we treat them, and then we send them back to the houses that has holes in their roofs, and they are like serving food with water that is not clean, and I got kind of sense that this is kind of not enough. I feel that it is not enough to treat patients and then send them back to an environment that make them sick in the first place. So that got me interested in this specific field called public health. And there's a specific conference that I applied for, in which if I get selected for this conference, it's a Model UN conference, by the way. If I get selected to this conference, I will be presenting about the healthcare of Indonesia to the Model UN in Boston, United States. So I took the chance and applied and got in. And although I'm a Malaysian, but I represented Indonesia and presented at the Model UN. At the time, the venue was in Boston Plaza Hotel. And as usual, it was my second time in Boston actually. The last time I was there was when I was a kid. So I took some time around and went to the Harvard Coop. And there's this bookstore. It's a large bookstore. It's a lot of interesting books. And I stumbled upon this book. It's called Mountain Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder. So when I read the back flap, the summary says that it tells the story of the doctor who would cure the world. Then flipping through a few pages, it mentioned that Dr. Paul Farmer, who was the protagonist of that book, along with his friend Jim Yong Kim, were medical students when they started an organization called Partners in Health, or PIH. That was based in Boston. And today, PIH is a very big organization serving thousands of people around the world, especially those who are vulnerable and are from the poor communities. So from that, I was interested in buying the book. So I bought the book and carried me all the way to my tour around Boston. And I finished the book when I was still in the United States before going back to Indonesia after the conference. And that already had me motivated to start something that is kind of similar to what Dr. Paul Farmer or Jim Young King did. But then I was a first year medical student. I had no money, obviously, was no scholarship, and I had no influence. So I had that motivation to start, but I didn't have the courage to do something about it. Until the third year of medical school, in which I attended a camp. So during that camp, we had an outdoor game. And during that outdoor game, I had a horrible accident in which I had a head injury, which caused my brain fluids to leak out of my left ear. So that left me in the hospital for almost 2 weeks. I had to be treated. I had to be on antibiotics because I could get brain infection anytime. But the worst thing about having brain fluids leaking out of ear is that you lose your sense of balance, because our ear, other than hearing, it also functions as a balancing organ. So I couldn't walk for a couple of months. I always had to hold on to something. And the worst part is the vertigo, in which the world feels always spinning around you, and you always feel nauseous. And I also have a permanent damage to my inner ear, in which I'm having a bit of hearing disability on my left ear, in which I couldn't hear like low frequency sounds, and it also left me with a permanent ringing in my ear that exists until today as we speak. So during that time, I guess it was one of the most depressing times of my life. I was 25, and there I was. I couldn't walk, and I couldn't even open my eyes without feeling dizzy. And that's when I thought again about this book that I read during my first year, about how motivated I was, and thinking that this accident happened to me very suddenly, so life can be really short. So I decided that I don't want to postpone anymore. Although basically I was a nobody at that time, I always think that because accidents can happen, so I want to start something now when I'm still a medical student and build from there. So I guess that's where the start of HBB is, where I gathered the courage, and then I talk about this idea to my good friend, a fellow co-founder, Dr. Wan Abdul Hanan, and we decided to draft all the legislations needed to register as a non-profit. So we finally registered Hospitals Beyond Boundaries as a non-profit in Kuala Lumpur in May 2012.